to Awakening, session number 4. Hopefully by now we should be in the groove, feeling at home, feeling like this is a space that we're used to and comfortable in. But just in case you're new or just in case you've forgotten, what we do here and the reason why we gather once a month, and although we only gathered 2 weeks ago, this is the December Awakening, so it is still only happening once this month. This is about coming together and worshiping God and being in a place where we encounter Him and recharging ourselves and praying, because we actually think that a bit of a transaction happens when we do that. As we worship God, as we explore who He is and who He says we are, I believe that we become energized and charged, commissioned, ready, filled, excited, and that God actually wants to do stuff in us that gets us ready for going out there. So we come into this space to encounter our Father, who reminds us who we are, builds us up as His kids, and gets us ready to kind of go out and actually think, what does it look like to work with God in the world? So in our first session, what we talked about was the fact that God has a plan for the world, which is good news, right? We talked about the gospel and the fact that actually I totally believe that God wants to make the world a better place, and He invites us into that process. And then in week 2, we talked about the fact that we worship God by getting involved in His grand master plan. And then last week we talked about last time we met, we talked about the fact that we are God's ambassadors, that we are His representatives, and actually, I guess the way that we worship Him is just by going, who are you? Who do you want me to be? How do I look a little bit more like you? And actually, the more we look like God, the more the world is transformed. And then tonight, we're looking at practical implication of that. What does that look like when it hits the ground? And we're going to be talking about service and sacrifice that flows out of those other things. But we're going to start with something which may sound revolutionary. We're going to start with something that may come as a whole load of, this might completely recalibrate the whole way you view life, the universe, and everything. So prepare yourselves. Are you prepared? Give me a little bit of feedback. Are we ready for this? This is going to be bold and monumental. Isaac, help us out. It's not about you. Congrats. If you ever got told as a kid, the world does not revolve around you, your parents were right, they weren't being mean, it's actually true. It's not about you. It's not about you. It's not about you. I genuinely believe if you can get that through your head, and if I can get it through my head, we'll change the world. If we can realize it's not about us. You are very important. You are very valuable. But the whole universe does not revolve around you. The whole universe revolves around a person called God and everything that He wants to see happen, not everything necessarily that you want to see happen. So are we on the same page? Are we up for kind of going with this? Okay, if you need prayer ministry for the truth of those words later, we will pray for you. But I just want to start with that point. It's not actually about you. To put it slightly more succinctly, do you want to stick up the next slide? Your gifts are not about you. Leadership is not about you. Your purpose is not actually about you. A life of significance is about serving those who need your gifts, need your leadership, and need your purpose. I'm going to read that one more time because I think it's profound. Your gifts aren't about you. Leadership is not about you. Your purpose is not about you. A life of significance, a life following Jesus, is about serving those who need your gifts, those who need your leadership, and those who need your purpose. This is like the secret to Christianity. It's not actually that big of a secret, but this is like part of the whole shebang. Like if you get this, you're like right there tracking with exactly where you're supposed to be. I believe God would say this to us tonight. You're my kids, and my love for you is unconditional. It is totally unchanging. I crown you with glory and honor, and I invite you to rule the universe with me. But you have to do it my way. And my way involves laying down your life and serving others. I give you the crown in the expectation that you cast it aside and wash people's feet, because that's what I do. So at our first Awakening gathering, we talked about God's plan to make the world better. And actually, if we're going to be involved in that plan, if we want to participate in that, if we want to respond to the good news of going, yes, I'm up for that, whatever that looks like, I'm up for it. It looks like this. And if we think we can be involved in God's plan in a way different to the way that God Himself did it, we've got a bit of a screw loose. God showed us what it looked like to be involved in this plan. He kind of gave us a blueprint. The blueprint was called Jesus. And if we think we can do this thing different to the way that Jesus did it, then there's something wrong. This is how He does it. And this is how we do it. We teach people and we show people what it looks like to love others and prefer them and put them first. So if we want to be involved in the master plan, we shouldn't be surprised that our method has to be like God did it. Paul puts it like this. Next slide. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Jesus did, who, being in his very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. So God, massive, huge, amazing, beyond the universe, managed to allow himself, humble himself to kind of become one of us, slightly awkward, teenagery, slightly, occasionally has BO and stuff like that, kind of people. He kind of humbled himself down into this thing. And then even as he walked on the earth, he didn't do it as a prince, he didn't do it as a ruler, he didn't do it as this kind of like epic religious kind of like, robed pope-like figure. He was like, I'm totally just going to like wander around and love on people. I'm totally just going to go around and serve and just be on the lookout. Who needs a little bit of, a little bit of a touch, a little bit of a kind word, a cup of tea being made for them? I'm sure they had tea in ancient Palestine. I'm sure that was a thing. This was the way Jesus did it. And so this is totally the way that we get involved in God's master plan, in the good news. This is totally the way that we worship God, and this is totally the way that we represent God. If we're going to be image bearers, this is what it needs to look like. It's not about you. Are you tracking with me? I can keep saying it in 50 different ways if you want, but Jesus calls us to this lifestyle. So, suivez-moi. I watched Finding Nemo recently. It's literally my favorite line, and it's not anywhere on YouTube. It was massively disappointing. I was trying to find a video. I was like, suivez-moi. It's like, follow me. So Jesus' call has always been, follow me. Like, take up your cross. Do the thing that I did. Be self-sacrificial. But the fascinating thing is, and here's the thing which I find really intriguing, is he doesn't just say that as a kind of just get over yourself kind of way. He says it with a promise attached. Jesus says, take up your cross and follow me, because whoever chooses to lose their life will gain their life. Anybody who chooses to lay their life down will suddenly find the life that they were actually created for, and it will be more joyful and more vibrant and more life-giving than anything they ever thought they could achieve for themselves. You are hardwired, you're physically, naturally designed to actually serve other people and sacrifice for them. And so Jesus doesn't just say, take up your cross because it'll be really grim. He doesn't just say, take up your cross because I really want you to be kind of wounded soldiers who kind of just do everything kind of slightly exasperatedly. He says, take up your cross because actually I've designed you to live this way, and I guarantee you it's the most fulfilling lifestyle you could possibly enter into. And I think if we begin to serve others and sacrifice out of that place, we will do it in a way which is more inspired, more encouraged, more hopeful than if we do it feeling like we've got to strive. And I think we strive way too much for this sort of stuff. I totally think we do. One of the massive failings that we always have is we overcomplicate what it looks like to serve people, I think. So if you're like me and you're a big vision person and you like living in a world of kind of what could be, what if, then you'll sit down one day and you'll think, how can I serve somebody? And before you know it, you'll be like drawing a design for a theme park where everything's free and actually just thinking that it's never going to work. And generally speaking, actually, the way that we can do this stuff is much more simplistic than we think. Jesus didn't do things that were massively complicated. He talked to people who other people didn't talk to. He touched people who other people wouldn't associate with. He, said kind words. He served people. He washed feet. These things are actually really seriously simple, but they have an impact. Here is a picture of the Pope. What a legend. Does anyone love our current Pope? He's a bit, what a superstar, right? If he ever comes to Derby, I don't think he'll ever come to Derby, but if it does, I'm actually going to be more fanboyish about the Pope coming than probably anyone else. I think he's a legend. Maybe Obama. Obama's a legend too. Anyway, what I love about this picture is here is somebody who just gets it. And if you look at the woman in the yellow, she's welling up at the emotion of the moment, that this guy, who is a significant world leader, if you think about it, he leads one of the largest Christian communities, if you like, on planet Earth. Hugely influential figure. And he's totally happy to take off that papal crown, get down on his knees and wash people's feet. I don't actually think they necessarily had stinky feet. I think this is more a kind of a sign of honoring people. And there's something holy taking place, particularly for that woman. Not necessarily the guy with the glasses who looks a little bit awkward and is highly aware that a photo is being taken. But that woman who's kind of lost in the moment. I love that. Sometimes we complicate stuff, and sometimes we don't need to. It can just be really simple. I think another issue that we sometimes get in our heads when we try and do the service and the sacrifice thing is we strive for it, and we find ourselves constantly trying to do it out of our own strength. So hands up if you've ever kind of reached the end of yourself, and then you're kind of like, you're absolutely exhausted, you're emotionally, physically, spiritually spent, and then someone's asked you to do something, and you felt like bursting into tears or have burst into tears, or you just kind of like, this is the worst possible moment for someone to ask a favor. Hands up if you've ever been in that situation. Yeah, most people in the room, right? I just want to say right now, I want to speak grace over you. I think there's a level where that's kind of just normal, and there's a level where it's okay. And I'm going to come back to why I think that's okay in a bit. But we sometimes totally strive for this thing. And we like treat people like a mission, and we kind of treat God's plan as like homework or hard work. And if we always operate out of that space, it's just going to exhaust us. It's just going to kill us. So can I suggest that actually one of the best ways that we can serve one another is by finding stuff that we're really good at and we really enjoy and doing that? So youth team, everyone just give the youth team an epic round of applause quickly. And I mean epic-sized cheers and all the rest, like a little bit of... The youth team do what they do, partially because they believe in it, but mostly because they enjoy it. Tim, you've been doing this for over 20 years. Like, is that because you're like a slave to the world, or is it because actually you get a kick out of it? It's great. Liam? Great. Beth? Like, the youth team love what they do, and they do a phenomenal job. But they serve this church phenomenally by doing something that they love, that gives them life, that gives them energy. And I just think there's something beautiful in that. And I sometimes think, we don't need to kind of sometimes treat it as a chore. We can do stuff that we actually enjoy, that we actually, gain life from, and serve one another in that way. What are you good at? What do you like doing? How can you apply that in a way that brings other people life? Like, I would really encourage you to think in terms of those sorts of things. What are the skills that you have? How can you use that to serve people? How can you do it in a way that you're not really striving? Like, I'm not saying that you guys never wind them up. You guys were on a resi about 2-3 weeks ago. I'm sure there was probably a point at 1 a.m, whilst you're all still talking and they're tearing their hair out, thinking when are they going to sleep, that they were a bit wound up. But they have grace for the times when it's frustrating because they love what they do and they love you guys. And I just want to encourage you to try and find those ways of serving one another, because suddenly we'll find life in it. And that's actually, I think, part of Jesus' plan. As you lay your life down, you discover a whole new life and like more fulfillment than you possibly thought you could. Having said that, at the same time, this is also about sacrifice. There is something about cost to this. So, going back to the example of earlier, hands up if you've ever you just had a really busy day and you sit down and dinner's over and you put your feet up and a TV or the PlayStation goes on and someone asks you to do something and actually you do have energy to do it, but you just refuse to do it because you don't want to. Right. At this point, I'm going to say get over yourself. At this point, I'm going to say deal with it. Okay? There is a difference, I think, between other stuff getting in your way and you getting in your way. Does that make sense? If you are genuinely dead on your feet, if you are just emotionally, if the idea of doing something makes you want to burst into tears, I would like to suggest that is other stuff getting in the way of you serving. And I think Jesus would go, take care of yourself in this situation, because if you don't take care of yourself, you won't be able to serve others. But if the thing standing in your way is really just secretly your lack of desire to do something, if really that's what's getting in the way, that's the point at which I want to say, get over yourself. Can you see the key difference there? I'm not saying you've got to completely spend your life on people, because God actually says, I care about you. You have value and importance. So it is important that you take care of yourself. It is important that you take time for yourself. But there are times when, seriously, deep down, we kind of know that I just don't want to. And that's what I think Jesus would say, take up your cross. It's not about you. You're tracking with me? So 3 ways I think that we can begin to serve one another, hopefully different to what you might necessarily think. 1, you can serve one another with your personality. So we looked last week about the fact that God has created you to be like him. He got really angry with Israel quite a lot because they used to build statues to represent him or other gods. And he was like, I don't need a statue to represent me. I've got people to represent me. It's you guys. I've designed you to look like me. I've designed you to behave like me. So you can actually serve one another with your personality. I just want you to think, just for we're going to have an awkward 20 seconds of silence in this room. I want you to picture somebody who you know who doesn't yet know God, who needs to get to know God by getting to know you first. Does that make sense? I want you to picture someone in your mind who you know who doesn't yet know God, who's going to get to know God by getting to know you first. Just going to give you a couple of seconds to picture who that is, because for some of you it'll take longer than others. Now, you can serve that person literally by being friends with them. When I talk about doing stuff that you enjoy, and I'm not saying necessarily pick kind of the hardest person to get along with that you know. I'm just talking about your mates here who don't know Jesus. You can serve them. You can sacrifice yourself for them just by being their mate. And I want to encourage you to invest in those relationships. Just be you. Just be you. You can serve people through just being you. And I love that. Not even through doing stuff, just through being. That's how you're designed. The second way that I think we can serve one another is through time. Now, we all know this, yes, we can give time. But again, let's try and look at this from a slightly different angle. How do you spend the time that you have? And how could you spend that time more effectively, efficiently to serve people? So let me explain what I mean with a little bit of an example. I used to get home from work about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I would spend my first 45 minutes at home pretty much every day listening to a podcast and cleaning the house. And I did this genuinely, not because I'm anal and I like a clean house. I did this because I wanted to serve the person I live with. I wanted to make the house a nice environment for them to come home to. I wanted it to be clean. I wanted it to smell nice. We had a dog. The dog did not smell nice, so I endeavored to make sure the house did smell nice by the time they got in. And it was a way of using that kind of little window where you get in from work and it's not quite dinner and it's not quite, and you're just like, what do I do with my time? And so I was doing something I enjoyed. I was listening to a podcast or I stuck on some music or something like that. It was a way of me using my time more efficiently and more effectively to serve someone. And so I'm not talking about you necessarily kind of picking up this grand, master plan or kind of joining a territorial army or going out and kind of giving an hour and a half a week to play piano for elderly people in an elderly home. Or you might want to do that, I don't know. But I'm saying, how can you use the time that you have in kind of every day more efficiently, more effectively to serve people? I would be amazed if 2 months into trying that, you didn't find life in it. Even if the person wasn't recognizing it, you find life in it. Because actually you're going, I feel like I'm making use of me. I'm making use of the preciousness of the moments that I've got. And the third thing that I think you can lay down, and this is a slightly alternative one, I think you can serve one another by sacrificing your reputation. I think this is probably one of the major reasons why we don't serve always in the way that we want to. Because we invest an awful lot of time in building up a picture of how does someone see me? I want to protect that. And sometimes I think the thing that gets in the way really is I just don't want to sacrifice my reputation. I don't want to change the way people perceive me. I don't want to look weird. And again, I just think there's a level where we just sort of got to go, can we get over this? Or can we proactively, when we're in that space, we think, I don't want to do this because, can we own that and go, all right, I'm aware that this is uncomfortable, but I'm going to sacrifice this and I'm going to go for it. anyway. And here's one thing I learned recently. I think whilst God does call us to sacrifice, he's also actually interested in protecting us. God has a vested interest in us finding a place of joy, finding a place of hope, finding a place of life. That's what his good news is all about. And I think sometimes we're more fearful of what sacrifice might look like for us than we need to be, because I think God actually goes, do you not think I'm going with you in this? So a small example, I was on retreat back in September, and I had this great plan for the day. I was going to go up to Ashbourne, and I was going to go out and go for a lovely walk in the Ashbourne countryside, and then I was going to sit in a cafe there called the Gallery Cafe, which have bottomless tea, and I was going to drink my body weight in tea and read a book, and it was going to be awesome. And I parked, and when I parked, I needed to get some cash out of the co-op to go and pay for the parking machine. And as I got my cash out, I heard a voice from behind me go, "Big as you." And in that moment, I knew God was saying, get some money out for her as well. And I was like, really, God? Why are we doing this? And so I went into the co-op, and I got my cash, and I got my change, and I walked out, and I defiantly walked past this Big Issue seller, and I went on a walk. And I started praying on the walk, and God went, do you think I'm really interested in having a conversation with you if you're not interested in my agenda for the day? And I went, but this is about retreat, it's about just you and me and just hanging out, and it's going to be great. And God was like, no, I'm not interested in hanging out with you if you're not interested in hanging out with me. I want to have an adventure, and you're being lame. This was kind of the dialogue going on. And I went on a 45-minute walk, basically having a go at God and talking about all the reasons why I didn't want to serve this person. All the reasons. I was like, it's uncomfortable for me, it's uncomfortable for them because I'm uncomfortable, I never know what to say, it's really awkward, why would you want me to do blah, blah, blah. And there was this great point where God went, do you not think that I would go with you into this situation? If I've asked you to do something, do you not think for a minute that I've actually prepped the grounds for you? And I was like, oh, that's a good one. And so I carried on walking, and then eventually I literally stopped midway and went, we both know how this argument's going to end. And I turned around and just walked straight back in the other direction. And as I was walking back, I was like, fine, if we're going to do this, what do you want me to say? And God was like, I just want you to say, I see her and I've got this. And I was like, that's lame, that's generic, it's rubbish, that's not a prophetic word, why would I want to say this? And basically ranted and raved, finally got back, got some more cash out. As I was walking over to her, I kid you not, feeling like I've got to share this thing, I've got to talk about my faith, this is going to be rubbish. I didn't even get to the point where I sat down, and she went, I've been praying for someone to come and speak to me. And I was like, and there was that point where I was like, yeah, okay, all right, maybe you are paving the ground. I sat down, and I had this lovely conversation with Monica. She lives in Birmingham, she's got 3 lovely kids. She's been selling Big Issues in Ashbourne for about 6 years. She's a Christian, and we had this epic time of praying together into a situation that's going on with her, and kind of they're changing the price of her housing, and she's really worried about it. And when I said, I know this is really lame, but I feel like I've got to say this, I just felt like God want to say to you, I see you and I've got this. And she burst into tears, and I welled up, and it was like this incredibly intimate moment. And the whole time, the wrestle with me was the reputation thing. The whole time for me was, I don't want to look awkward, I don't want to seem like an idiot, this is going to be uncomfortable. And the thing I learned most that day was not, oh, maybe it'll be all right next time. It was, God walks with us into those situations. And actually, as we sacrifice, I can't even remember what I read in that book in the 2 hours I spent in the cafe that afternoon. I don't really care, because the most precious time of that day was hanging out with Monica, and I would not have gotten there if I wasn't eventually prepared to kind of go, okay, God, you're going to win this argument about me sacrificing and getting over this. And I think that's partly what I'm on about. As we serve others just by being us, the money was incidental, just by sitting and talking and being me and being true to what God was saying to me. I felt like I served this woman, and it was a precious time. My favorite ever poem, Philip, have you still got the poster on your wall of the vision? Sweet. So the 24/7 vision, some of you were here when we played the video the other week. If you've never seen it, YouTube it. There's a great line in it. Would they surrender? This is Pete Gregg's dream of an army of young people who are going to serve Jesus faithfully and change the world. And there's a line in it. Would they surrender their image or their popularity? They'd surrender their very lives. They'd swap seats with a man on death row, guilty as hell. They'd trade their throne for an electric chair. And I listened to this daily when I was a kid, and there's something in that I just want to kind of share and impart with you guys. If we genuinely want to be like Jesus, if we genuinely want to engage in his good news story, if we genuinely want to worship him, if we genuinely want to be like him and be his ambassador, we do it by serving and sacrificing. And the great news is it comes with this promise. Not life's going to be rubbish, life's going to be really hard, life's about getting over yourself, life's about, being kind of a slave for humanity. He says, as you do this, you step into the life I designed you to live. More hope, more freedom, more life, more joy, more love than you ever thought imaginable. And sometimes the hardest thing is just taking that first step and kind of doing the get over yourself thing. So one final stupid little story, and then I'm going to pray and we're going to just sit and discuss. Who's ever been to Longleat Safari Park down in the southwest? Oh, youth, you've got to get out more. Tell your parents that you need to go to Longleat. So it's this great thing, great place down in the southwest. And I was there when I was about 13 years old, and they had one of these vertical death slides, the ones where it's like a sheer drop and then it levels out. And I saw this thing and I was like, I'm totally doing that. That looks amazing. And I climbed up to the top and I sat there and I just could not bring myself to go off. I just could not bring myself to go over the ledge. And I think so often, sometimes with us, it was the thing with Monica again, is it's like, on the one hand, I'm like, I totally want to do that thing. And then when the opportunity comes, I'm like, I'm not getting off. This is not happening. This is not right. This is wrong. And we come up with these excuses, whatever they might be. Anyway, the thing that helped me get over that was, and I'm not even joking, I was probably sat there for about 25 minutes. It wasn't a short time. I'm embarrassed to say it was quite an extended period of time. And then this little 5-year-old who'd been queuing behind me just went, and just kind of sat and went straight down. And I was like, oh, okay, right, I'm doing this. And I did it, and it was great. But sometimes I think we just need to get out of our own way sometimes. We just need to have faith that actually this thing's going to bottom out. It's going to be okay. There is actually going to be real life to it. It's not as scary. It's not as hard. It's not as difficult as it imagines. And sometimes it's not about us, but sometimes we make it about us, and we just need to remove ourselves from being the obstacle. And as we do that, the amazing thing is the world becomes a better place. The world becomes a brighter place. How much better would the world be if every time you're upset, someone gave you a hot chocolate? That's got to be our mentality. How much better would the world be if every time it was chucking it down with rain, someone walked alongside you with an umbrella? That'd be beautiful, right? I want to live in that world, and it's only going to happen if I play my part. So we need to learn to serve and sacrifice. One thing before we get to the questions. We're about to have the Christmas break. Students, particularly older youth as well. I want to challenge you to think over Christmas, what would it look like for me to get involved in serving the church as well? We've talked about the world, and that's great. There is a bite-sized chunk that we have on a Sunday or a Friday night, if you like, where you can give of yourself and serve others and make this space better and brighter. And actually, you can bring your personality into this space. So I just want to challenge you over the Christmas break to maybe think and reflect, what area of the church can I get involved in and bring myself to and make better? That I can give my personality, my time, and my reputation to. That will be better. And again, think in terms of what am I good at? What do I enjoy? How can I invest in those things? If you really like tea, there's a great tea and coffee rota, I'm just saying. But just want you to think about that. Anyway, 2 questions for you to be discussing in groups quickly then. Isaac, what sort of things, and by things I mean excuses or obstacles, get in the way of you serving others? Let's just own them and be honest about them, shall we? And what opportunities are available to you to serve others on a regular basis? What things often crop up that you can do? I'm just going to pray, and then we'll break down into groups and discuss this stuff. Father, I thank you that our gospel is one of a God who sacrificed himself for us. I thank you that our entire faith, our entire reason for being here tonight is built on the fact that you model this so perfectly, that you love us, that you pour yourself out for us, and that you have a plan to make the world a better place by teaching everyone else to do the same. Ultimately, everything that you're about can come back to loving you and loving others. And greater love has no man than this, than laying down his life for his friends, for those around him. So God, I pray that you would help us represent you on earth, participate in your good news on earth, worship you on earth by giving of ourselves to others in ways that bring us life and hope and joy, sometimes in ways that we have to get over. God, help us see the crosses that we need to pick up and help us carry them. And God, I thank you that as we do that, your promise to us is that we find life. So God, as we discuss and we try and think what this might look like practically in our lives, I pray that you would just spark ideas in our heads as well and solidify stuff in our hearts. And ultimately, we pray that out of this time of sharing and reflecting on how we can serve together, the world will be a brighter and better place that looks more like your kingdom. Amen.